The Boston Celtics, with a 1-0 series lead in their conference semifinal set against the Cleveland Cavaliers, a minus 8,000 favorite. Let me repeat that. Minus 8,000 favorite for Boston to win their second round series against Cleveland. And because of that and how the rest of the playoff path now looks, the Celtics have become a minus money odds-on favorite to win the NBA championship. Minus 120. Again, Boston minus 120 into an odds-on minus money category for the first time in this NBA playoff run. Part of that is because of what is happening in the Western Conference with the reigning champs and the Western Conference favorites entering this postseason. The Nuggets down in an 0-2 hole against the Timberwolves. Part of that is because the Sixers, the Bucks, the Heat all have been eliminated from Eastern Conference playoff contention as well. But for the first time this playoff run, DRS, we see an odds-on favorite to win the Larry O'Brien Trophy, and it's the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, and these lines are going to move on a day-to-day basis. There's no doubt about that. You take a look at the Minnesota Timberwolves at that plus 300 price. That's the one that's getting shorter to watch. And also, still a lot of value on OKC here at that plus 650 price. But also, if we're trying to see if one of these teams can make that climb, we talked about it yesterday. How about this? A 15-1 price we saw yesterday on the Denver Nuggets. That's now sitting at 16-1. So you're getting maximum value there if you think the reigning champions can actually climb back into the series. But also, the Boston Celtics at a minus 115 price. We talked about this yesterday. Is it a price I want to bet? No. But when you look at the path to get to the finals, it's so much easier than the Timberwolves and the Thunder and the New York Knicks and the Nuggets, right? Because they're the favorites here. They're supposed to get there with ease. We'll see if it plays out that way. But for me, that 16-1 price, it's still calling me out here, Ben. It still is, man.
Yeah. Listen, I get it. I understand it. The Cavaliers are down 0-1 to Boston, and they're 170-1. The Nuggets are down 0-2 to Minnesota, and they're just 16-1 right now. Again, at this point last week, Denver and Boston separated by just over $1. It was plus 115 for the C's to win the NBA title. It was plus 230 for the Nugs. How much difference a 7-day span can make. We also, for the first time, Donnie, are seeing a new market available within these NBA championship odds. That's Boston versus the field. The Celtics minus 115 to win the NBA championship, minus 110 for any of the other 7 teams, East or West, to win the NBA title, still remaining in these playoffs in the association. That includes all 4 teams out West in what we still expect to be a tightly contested race for that conference crown. Donnie, we've made a couple of comparisons between Boston and UConn throughout the stretch run of the regular season, now into the playoffs, of course, with the Connecticut Huskies in their title defense to go back-to-back, of which they accomplished, and they were such a short favorite entering the big dance and throughout their NCAA tournament dominance once again. And the question we would ask, is there a team still left in the bracket? Is there a team, a part of this field, that presents a challenge for UConn? And the answer really was no. Could somebody in a 1-game scenario knock them off? Maybe. Now it's a 7-game series scenario against the Boston Celtics. I'm not sure there's a team in the Eastern Conference that I would look at and say, ooh, they present a challenge from a matchup perspective for the Celtics. But I do believe that a couple of the teams out in the Western Conference in a 7-game series for an NBA championship on the line do present some challenges for the C's.
Yeah, look, they're going to get tested here. And let's just say we have it a formalities. The Boston Celtics do move on to the Eastern Conference Finals, and so do the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks are pretty tested and tough here, and Brunson can be that guy that can go off on any single game, shoot 30 times a game, score 45 points. We've seen that before, but we really think the test is going to come from the Western Conference when it's either going to be the Minnesota Timberwolves or OKC. When we talk about that field bet, yes, you get everybody else going up against the Celtics, but half of those teams you just throw out immediately, and then you say to yourself, well, who's going to be the viable option? And it would be the T-Wolves and the Thunder. Here's the question marks. They're both really good basketball teams, but having said that, they're not home court advantage once they get to the finals, where the Celtics are A, a really good team, and B, you can barely beat them on their home court. That's the tough part here, which is why we lose that UConn theory. Yes, they're the best. There's other valuable teams out there that will be playing the Celtics, but the Celtics run through the East is easier than what the run through the West is. And once you get there, how much are you going to have left in the tank? Because Minnesota and OKC are going to do battle against each other, where you might have the Celtics win a 5 or an easier 6-game series against the New York Knicks. Those are always the things I like to look at. So for me, I don't like the price at 115, but if you ask me now who's going to win the championship, it's going to be the Boston Celtics. Why? Because I know they'll be in the finals, and I know, Ben, they have home court advantage.
The Celtics are now a minus 400 favorite to win the Eastern Conference Championship. I wonder what a series outright price would be against either New York, of course, shorter, or the Indiana Pacers. Of course, the Knicks, a 1-0 series lead against Indiana. Game number 2 inside the Garden is tonight. It's the only game of playoff action in the association on this Wednesday evening slate. But let's go to the Western Conference because, again, Boston's a minus 400 favorite to win the East. Let's go to the Western Conference. We're entering yesterday after the Timberwolves take a 2-0 series lead against the Nuggets. They go into minus money to win the Western Conference crown for the first time. Are you surprised, however, DRS, that OKC did not close that gap after their dominant performance in the opening game of their series against Dallas?
I'm not surprised by the notion where, for myself, if I would reset the odds market, that wouldn't be correct because I'd have Oklahoma City a little bit closer to the Minnesota Timberwolves. We have to understand how these sports books will operate. Those numbers are dictated by the wagers that are coming in. And if most people are looking at the Timberwolves as the ultimate threat in the Western Conference to challenge the Celtics out of the East, then that is price appropriate. And quite frankly, you're watching a Timberwolves team literally dismantle one of the most talented teams in the NBA in the Suns and then say, okay, well, the Nuggets, they messed around the regular season, blew it that last week. I believe they lost to the San Antonio Spurs to cough up that number 1 overall seed, but it doesn't matter where the seed is there. They know how to win. They won it last year. They'll do it again this year against untested teams in OKC and Minnesota. So vice versa, that's why you're getting that minus 115, because we're watching in real time a true superstar in Anthony Edwards, a team that plays crazy defense, a team that went into Denver, one of those home court advantages. You're not supposed to win games and easily won 2 games and now going back to Minnesota. So I can't fault the sports book where they're at because I do think the betting patterns are still saying to us, Ben, the Minnesota Timberwolves are the better team overall, but I just think it's a slight to OKC, who, again, if they do meet in the Western Conference Finals, and I'm anticipating that, OKC's the home court advantage here. That's massive.
It doesn't matter if it's Denver. Oklahoma City, as the number 1 seed in the West, has home floor advantage. They have played 5 playoff games so far this postseason, 3 in Oklahoma City. They have won all 3, 2 of them by 22 points plus 1 by 30. Here's the thing. Oklahoma City, in my mind, there's been a little bit of reshuffling in these prices. Boston minus 360 to win the East. Still a very hefty favorite. Minus 115 on Minnesota as of this Wednesday evening. Not from those numbers in the overnight hour, but is Oklahoma City, even against the Timberwolves, and let's say the Timberwolves pull off a 4-game series sweep or a gentleman's sweep against Denver. I expect the Nuggets to get at least 1 victory here in that set against the T-Wolves. What is the number for Oklahoma City in a Western Conference Finals where they would have home floor advantage against Minnesota? Are the Timberwolves going to be that strong of a favorite? Are the Timberwolves going to be favored even outright? I think there's a lot of value, even at this point, on the Thunder.
Yeah, I think the Timberwolves actually will be outright favorites here, but we're talking about like a minus 120 or so price at that point, because it also matters. If you do have Minnesota sweeping the Denver Nuggets out of the playoffs after sweeping the Suns, that's going to go a long way, but also OKC sweeping the Dallas Mavericks, and I know how that'll play out. Come on, man. Injuries, Zion, round number 1. You know Luka was on 1 leg. I don't give him any credit, even though they'll probably be 8-0 before they head into the Timberwolves series. That's how it's going to play out here for me, Ben.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Denver was a minus 205 favorite before this series got started. The Timberwolves played that underdog role against both Denver and Phoenix. Could be a favorite to win the West if they reach that point.